Greetings and welcome to your Washington State Progressive Caucus Progressive Pizza Party. I don't know how many people attended our Socialist Pizza Party the last time, but that's what this one is fashioned over. But this is not a working meeting. If you've been to a Progressive Caucus meeting, you know we do things a little differently. So we're jumping into the state party convention by having a party. And actually, we're going to be doing two things here. One, we're going to celebrate dissent, because that's actually part of the tactics of our mission statement. Celebrate dissent. Our greatest strength is our respect for our differences and diversity of opinion. The other thing we're going to do is make some acknowledgments. And we have a lot of very special guests here tonight that we're going to acknowledge, and they will acknowledge some of the progressive actions that they and we are taking across the state of Washington. But first, I have two acknowledgments that I need to make. We, the members of the Washington State Progressive Caucus, acknowledge the land we are on today as the traditional territory of the Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation, Confederated Tribes of the Chehalis Reservation, Confederated Tribes and Bands of the Yakima Nation, the Cowlitz, Ho, Jamestown, Sklallam, Kalispel, Lower Elwha Clallam, Lummi, Makah, Muckleshoot, Nisqually, Nooksack, Port Gamble, Sklallam, Puyallup, Quileute, Quinault, Samish, Soxhawtl, Shoalwater Bay, Skokomish, Snoqualmie, Spokane, Squaxin, Sequillamish, Suquamish, Swinomish, Tulalip, Upper Skagit, Steilacoom, Duwamish, Snohomish, and the Chinook Nation. We acknowledge them, the theft of their land, and their roles today in taking care of these lands. In addition to our land acknowledgement, we also have to acknowledge Emmett Till, Eric Gardner, John Crawford III, Michael Brown, Ezell Ford, Dante Parker, Michelle Cassot, Laquan McDonald, Tanisha Anderson, Akai Gurley, Tamir Rice, Romaine Brisbane, Jeremy Reed, George Mann, Matthew Ajibade, Frank Smart, Natasha McKenna, Tony Robinson, Anthony Hill, Maya Hall, Philip White, Eric Harris, Walter Scott, William Chapman II, Alexia Christine, Brendan Glenn, Victor Manuel LaRosa, Jonathan Sanders, Freddie Blue, Joseph Mann, Salvador Ellswood, Sandra Bland, Albert Joseph Davis, Darius Stewart, Billy Ray Davis, Samuel DeBose, Michael Sabi, Brian Keith Day, Christian Taylor, Troy Robinson, Asham Farrow Manley, Felix Kumi, Keith Harrison McLeod, Junior Prosper, Lamontez Jones, Patterson Brown, Dominic Hutchinson, Anthony Ashford, Alonzo Smith, Tyree Crawford, India Kager, Levante Biggs, Michael Lee Marshall, Jamar Clark, Richard Perkins, Nathaniel Harris Pickett, Benny Lee Tigner, Miguel Espinal, Michael Knoll, Kevin Matthews, Betty Jones, Quintonio Legrier, Keith Childress Jr., Janet Wilson, Randy Nelson, Anthony Scott, Wendell Celestine, David Joseph, Kaylin Roquemore, Dizon Perkins, Christopher Davis, Marco Loud, Peter Gaines, Tori Robinson, Darius Robinson, Kevin Hicks, Mary Trujillo, DeMarcus Seamer, Willie Tillman, Terrell Thomas, Seville Smith, Alton Sterling, Philando Castile, Terrence Crutcher, Paul O'Neill, Alteria Woods, Jordan Edwards, Aaron Bailey, Ronell Foster, Stephen Clark, Antoine Rose II, Botham Jean, Pamela Turner, Dominique Clayton, Tatiana Jefferson, Christopher Whitfield, Christopher McCorvey, Eric Reason, Keontae Spencer, Michael Lorenzo Dean, Trayvon Martin, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Tony McDade, George Floyd, Manuel Ellis, and many, many more whose names we may never know, who, along with the members of the aforementioned tribal nations and scores of others, have had to sacrifice their bodies, blood, and identities for the creation of the world we live in now, the world we aim to change. Through our mission to build a broad coalition of real progressives across Washington state, to find progressive leaders who promote people and the planet before corporate profit. People we will hold to the progressive standard. People we will support and elect and help them push our progressive agenda through the system. Thank you for sitting with me while I make these acknowledgements. An acknowledgement of the land, an acknowledgement of the losses we've endured, but will fight against henceforth. So, I don't know if she's here yet, but one of those progressive leaders that we endorsed, we campaigned for, and helped to get into office, special guest tonight, Varisha Khan from Redmond City Council. It is my distinct pleasure and hope that I can hand the mic over to her now.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for the opportunity to be able to speak to you all today with the Washington Progressive Caucus. I am honored and lucky to be able to sit in the position to be able to be here, recognizing, as Keoki has just done, acknowledging the difficult time that we are in right now. We are in a time where we're dealing with systemic racism, a global pandemic, and a number of other income and social issues that are plaguing us to this day. And so, to be able to speak to you all today in a moment where we want to be able to talk about what's coming ahead of us, right? How can we take the experiences, the pain, the emotions, and the urgency to be able to take action to the next step in hopes of creating a better democracy than the one that we have today. So I want to acknowledge as well that, like Keoki has just done, we're in a time where we're in the aftermath of action and need to take action after the death of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and so many others that Keoki listed. And so, the step and the place that we're in right now is to be able to engage both, within the electoral system that we have right now, getting ready for elections. We're in an election year, right? Every year is an election year, but especially this year, getting ready for our elections, getting ready to even acknowledge that, we have work to do in the current governments that we have that serve us right now. So I want to be able to talk to you all just briefly and just touch base, right? Because this is a time where we need hope, we need some guidance, we all need action. And so my hope is to be able to just remind you all of 3 or 4 actions that we all need to remember to take, both to look within ourselves and see how much we're doing, and also to be able to share with those around us. So first and foremost, again, we have primary elections and general elections that are going to come up very quickly this year. So this is just simply a reminder to everyone that, if you or loved ones have not registered to vote, please make sure you do so. And to remember that, this year is going to be especially important because of the systemic challenges that we are seeing right now, and the opportunity that we have to be able to undo a lot of that step by step. So, so a reminder to everyone to remember to register people that are close to you to vote, your friends, your neighbors, your families, and to turn out to vote in this election, and to turn out the people around you as well to vote, and to also be part of those campaigns that you want to see succeed. As we're seeing, a number of the reasons why we have these systemic issues is because of who is and who isn't at the decision-making table, right? We're seeing that, across the country, and it's been told for decades that we don't have enough Black leaders, progressive Black leaders, to be able to make the tough decisions to not only start to challenge systemic racism, but undo white supremacy. So, looking to the candidates that are running right now, and I know a number of you, a number of those candidates have been endorsed and have been supported already, but Twina Nobles, Marcus Young, April Berg, and even Carolina Mejia, right, who could be the first woman of color elected at a county council level in Washington State. Those are a few races that are absolutely important to look to, absolutely important to support, and they'd be candidates that will bring those changes that we're looking for. And so looking to those campaigns, also Kirsten Harris-Talley, how could I forget her as well? Make sure to support her as well. So looking to those candidates, making sure to turn out to vote for them. And also remembering this is also a census year. So make sure that everyone around you gets counted as well, right? Because our power also comes from our numbers, from getting counted, from making sure that the resources that a number of us are fighting for to receive right now does come from the federal government, and is going to be what determines the types of social services and funding that we get for the next decade. So, so as we're remembering to fight, to take on a number of issues like defunding the police, like funding more social services at the local level and at the state level, the census is absolutely a vital tool to making sure that those resources are sustainable and constantly coming into our communities for the next decade. So vote, campaign, support Black candidates, fill out the census, and organize and lobby, especially at the local and state level right now. So, as a council member in Redmond, I have already committed to defunding the police in our city, and putting those resources and all that funding into social services and human services in our city. That's something that it's not a popular opinion, especially among current elected officials right now. So support the elected officials, right? Urge your elected officials to step up, to take that step, and make sure there's enough support and momentum around them to make that happen. This is a budget year, especially for a lot of local governments. So if you can get involved in the budget process, that's your opportunity to make that change happen. So look to your cities, look to your local government, look to the state legislature even, to see how you can start to make an impact and lobby your elected officials in the budget process, as well as along the policy processes as well. And so that's what I have for you all today. So again, to remind you all, vote, register people to vote, support Black candidates, support the amazing candidates of color who are stepping up and taking those issues on head first. And I know the Progressive Caucus is awesome for wanting to push for that change. You all endorsed me when I ran. You took that chance. And so now I'm hoping to carry that forward for others as well too at this time. Fill out the census and lobby and organize at the local and state level to defund the police, to provide for more social services, and ultimately be able to undo that systemic racism that will bring us to a place where we are more just and equitable. So without further ado, I have the privilege of introducing the amazing Senator Bob Hasegawa, who I had the privilege of going to the DNC with in 2016 and have seen just on the front lines, working for worker protections, housing protections, and a number of other immigrant and refugee protections as well too in this time. So without further ado, Senator Bob Hasegawa.
Varisha, wow, so good to see you again. And
great to see you.
Back to follow, you covered it so much. Appreciate your mentioning filling out the census, though. That is really going to be important, especially for redistricting purposes, because you know how redistricting gets played against us a lot. So my role here is, though, to talk a little bit about some hopeful stuff, positive stuff that we can work on. So Varisha talked about protecting the budget and those programs that our communities depend on. But whatever happens, we have to have a way to finance this stuff. So very important to think about two things when we talk about public financing. One of them is we have to change our revenue system. We need a comprehensive, progressive rewrite of how we collect our revenue. And you all know about that because you're members of the Progressive Caucus, so I won't get into that. But the second part of this is, how do we use that money that we do get in a fair way to put it to work for the people in the smartest way? So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the public bank proposal that we have. And it's moving forward. Good news, but it's moving forward very slowly. Bad news. We were expecting a business plan from the Evans School a year ago. They finally got something to us about 3-4 weeks ago, but it was nothing about what we were looking for. But it's going to take a serious combing through for our Senate State Bank Caucus to put together a real bill that we think is going to meet the needs of our people. But I wanted to talk a little bit about how this bank is so important right now at this point in time, because we are looking at some of the biggest budget deficits probably in the history of our state, at the same time that needs are escalating steeper than they have ever in the history of our state. So a public bank is different from a commercial bank in so many different ways, but fundamentally, it is counter-cyclical to the economy. So public banks can put new money into our economy to help it bridge the economic divide that we're looking at, staring us in the face. And it does that by, people say you can't print money. That's true. You know, we don't have a printing press, but we do have books. And that's what banks do, is they create money on their books. And so people might think, you know, Washington State or even the federal government has operated under this sort of austerity mentality where they say, we don't have any money to fund all of these programs. Well, that's bull. Yes, because where did they magically come up with $3 trillion to inject in the economy through congressional action just recently, right? It's because the Federal Reserve is creating money on its books. The state could use that same power of a bank to help create money to get us through our economic crisis, but also it builds an institution for our children so that, because we can't even imagine what kind of infrastructure they're going to need 10, 25, 50 years from now. But wouldn't it be a great bequeathal from our generation to our children's to give them this resource to be able to build a society, afford to build the society that they want or they'll need? So the whole concept of banking is really not rocket science. It's all overcomplicated. Under our current system right now, we have only so many ways to fund programs. We generate revenue by taxes, but if we want to not do an austerity budget as a result of this coronavirus economic crisis that we're in, we're going to have to find new revenue. But how do we find new revenue when our only sources of new revenue would be to raise regressive taxes, which hurt those people the most who are trying to benefit? So that's one way to raise revenue. We can maybe claw back some corporate tax breaks. That'll raise a bunch of revenue. Or we can sell bonds. Selling bonds is, in the long term, really a bad idea. I mean, it's okay if you need money right now today to do something with, but our bonding strategy for the state has been to sell bonds 1 year, sell the bonds another year, sell the bonds another year. So you can see how it starts pyramiding on itself. So say we sold $1 billion bond. That $1 billion actually costs us between $2 and $3 billion by the time we've repaid it in full over the next 20 to 30 years. So if our usable revenues from the bonds goes this way, but the debt service on those bonds is going this way, you can see how we can hit a ceiling where we just can't afford it anymore. And we do that year after year after year until we hit our debt ceiling. And our debt capacity is in our state's constitution. Well, we've been bouncing off the debt capacity for years and years now, which means we can't sell more bonds or borrow more money until we've paid off 25-year-old debt. So we wonder why our infrastructure is crumbling around us. We can't even think about building new infrastructure. And, what about high-speed rail or, expanding our water and sewer capacities to meet the demands of the increasing population? We have this huge shortage of housing. Why don't we refocus on doubling our efforts into public housing and building public housing communities where they're livable communities with multi-generational, diverse, mixed use facilities with community schools, and that's all that stuff. We can't even think about doing that because we can't afford it unless we create our own public bank. So I see a public bank essentially as being really inevitable at some time because the rest of the world has proven that it works. Most other countries have their own publicly owned bank. That's how they're able to afford to build all their infrastructure. And in the United States, we depend on commercial banks for our public financing as opposed to public banks for public financing. That's why we're getting bled dry by Wall Street. All this debt service that I talked to you about, the $2 to $3 billion we end up paying for use of $1 billion, that's all profit to Wall Street. So we could do that very same thing. If we capitalized a bank with, say, that $1 billion, that if that bank were the depository for all of our tax revenues as well, that $1 billion actually leverages out to $10 billion worth of lending capacity. And that's on the safe side. Banks consider 10-time leveraging as safe. They get into trouble if they leverage well out like during the crash after 2007 and 8. Banks were leveraged out to 75 times the capital. So when one capital or collateral base crashed, it crashed the whole system. But at any rate, that's getting too deep in the weeds. What I'm trying to make is now is the time, and not just the time to reform our revenue system, but it's a time to look at pushing the system, not backing off right now and settling for marginal changes. I love how Keoki introduced this at first. We are at a point in time where, we respect dissent. That's kind of our role, because when we push the envelope, it opens space behind us to do other stuff. So now is the time for us to really push. The stars are aligning because of all of the different social ills and social disparities and gaps in our safety nets that people's eyes are finally opening up to. They're seeing that well, maybe what we had really isn't what we want to get back to. Maybe there is something better. Let's create that. And now's the time to be pushing for it. And no better time than right now when all of these elections are staring everybody in the face and they have to answer some tough questions. What are you going to do about reforming our tax system? What are you going to do to support a state bank? What are you going to do to make sure that unemployment is paid, or that we're closing the gap on the income inequality problem, which is one of the fundamental issues I think that most Americans are most concerned about. So at any rate, I have limited time. I don't want to go over I had a timer on myself, and I'm right at it right now. So Keoki, I don't know if anybody has any questions or if you want me to even take time for questions, but that's my pitch. We're moving forward with public banking, although it's not as fast as I would hope. It would be great if we could get access to some of that federal dollars that they just opened up for direct lending to states and local governments. Then maybe we could put it to use immediately to try and get us through this economic crisis. So thanks. Oh, by the way, you can go to, on Facebook, you can go to @State Bank for Washington. I try to put articles that are relevant on it fairly regularly. It also goes by the alter ego of Invest in Washington, not Wall Street. And if you want to see a model of a great public bank, go to the Bank of North Dakota website. It's bnd.nd.gov. Who wants to go to a bank website? But the Bank of North Dakota is very fascinating because they tell the history of how it came about. So I'm sorry I went a little bit long, but thanks for your indulgence, and go fight win.
Thank you, Bob. I love your background so much. That was really great. I'm Cedar Kennedy. I'm the Eastern Washington Vice Chair of the Progressive Caucus, and I have been for a number of years. And welcome to this party. I want to thank Keoki for that very long list that he started with. I think that was really moving. And it helped crystallize something in my brain. When I was thinking about what to say tonight, something that kept popping into my head was the 4 children of the Passover Seder that we celebrate, we Jews celebrate at Passover. And there's these 4 kids that ask these very salient questions. And one of them is the child who does not know to ask. And so we educate the child who doesn't even know that they're supposed to ask. And so that's kind of who I want to direct myself to today, because we heard a wake-up call around the world. The world heard a wake-up call last month. But it's a lot bigger than just George Floyd or Breonna Taylor or Ahmaud Arbery. It's much bigger. And some of the conversations I've had with white people over the last few weeks is that a lot of, I didn't know that Kennewick was a sunset town. I didn't know how many people were killed by the police. I didn't know things were so bad. So a lot of you are educated progressive liberals, and you do know, and you do go think critically, and you do seek out information. But I want to encourage those of you who haven't to do that. It's okay to have not known, because we live in a very segregated race society. But now you need to know. And so you need to find groups where you can ask questions, and you need to not emotionally tax the people of color in your life by asking them. You need to ask other white people, because it's been a rough few weeks for all the Black and brown and Indigenous people that I know. There has been a really intense and potent intersection of racism and a virus and a pandemic that has just hit people so hard in so many ways. And so, although I was supposed to talk about the history of the progressive or the socialist pizza parties, you know, it is what it is. People ordered pizzas and sent them to Bernie delegates 4 years ago. Now we need to redirect that energy and be supporting Black and brown owned businesses, Asian businesses, Indigenous businesses. So that's why we were asking you to order food tonight from local minority owned businesses. But we're also asking you to, if you have money, to donate to domestic shelters and food banks and homeless shelters, because the economy has impacted people a lot. And you may not personally be feeling it, but I know for a fact that people are. Somebody actually asked me for food yesterday. Not money, not a ride, just food. Just like, do you have any extra food? So it's rough out there. So that's what we're asking people to do, is support. You know, I'm a Black Studies major in college. There's a saying, Black folks are the first to get fired and the last to get hired. So we really need to support the Black and brown communities right now, financially, if you can. And I want to bring up that tomorrow, Black Lives Matter has called for a general strike throughout the state of Washington. So if you can avoid spending any money or going to work at all, that would be good. If you have to spend money, again, spend them at minority-owned businesses. I want to personally offer myself to white people out there who have questions and want to talk about racism. I'm happy to talk about it. It can be very uncomfortable. And again, I don't want anybody emotionally taxing people of color any more than they already are. So feel free to find me through the Progressive Caucus. And one great resource I want to point out is KEXP.org, the radio station in Western Washington that you guys are so lucky to have, but I listen to it online out here in Eastern Washington, KEXP.org. They have a great statement on the front of their page. And then if you scroll down just a little bit in small yellow letters, it says anti-racist social justice resources. And there is so much there. There are videos you can watch, there's books you can read, and there's tons of ways you can donate all over the country, locally and nationally. And if you don't know, ask. Like, we need to get schooled on what's really going on, and it's a lot. So that's what I have to say. And go order your food. And thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Cedar. Thank you a lot from my heart, because that's actually, it is exhausting to carry your own water, and then somebody else wants to throw their water on top of you too, and you just don't have it. I want to give, before we go on though, I want to give props to Senator Hasegawa showing his Trekker colors. I put the new bridge on mine, and I really think that we should talk to Starfleet about getting a ship designation for the USS Hasegawa. But getting,
yes.
getting back to reality, it is my pleasure to introduce Jordan Sears. He is the chair of the 39th LD Democrats and is a member of the Gold Bar City Council. Welcome, Jordan Sears.
Thank you, Keoki. As you said, my name is Jordan Sears. I'm chairman of the 39th LD Democrats and council member for the city of Gold Bar. I also serve as mayor pro-tem or vice mayor, in which I was appointed in January. I was appointed to the city council in March of 2019, unanimously by the council, becoming the youngest elected official in the history of the state and the youngest openly elected LGBTQ official in the country, in which I'm really proud of that. And I'm hoping someone will beat that record for me. But, you know, we are here today because of the Socialist Pizza Party. My pizza's not arrived yet. But one of the key issues that has been fought for decades, Martin Luther King Jr. says, capitalism has outlived its usefulness. It takes necessities from the masses to give luxuries to the classes. And he goes on to say that there are three evils of society: militarism, racism, and capitalism, and that social justice, economic justice, and environmental justice are entwined. And to fight for one, we have to fight for all three. Now, my city is about 2,000 people. It is 93% white. It is a ruby red Republican city in a ruby red Republican district, which we're working on changing with some really great candidates. But I'm a fluke on the council. You know, I am a democratic socialist and I'm proud of that. Sadly, one of the things is I haven't been able to go to a protest as much as I want. I have arthritis and some other health issues that have made it so that I haven't been able to go. But instead, I made a commitment last Tuesday at our last council meeting, and I finished that commitment the next day to donate half of my yearly salary to the Seattle King County Black Lives Matter County Jail Bail Fund. That was $600 that went through on Wednesday. Last night, I introduced an ordinance to the city, which is probably the furthest left ordinance ever proposed in the city of Gold Bar, that would ban officers contracted through the Snohomish County Sheriff's Department who are on the Brady list from being assigned to the city of Gold Bar. As much as I personally would like to see some of these proposals of defund the police and everything like that, that is not feasible for my city, as much as I'd like to see that around the county and around the state. And I do support those efforts with what Varisha's doing and what some state legislators are doing. You know, with that, it is gonna cause an uproar, and I'm gonna need support from people, not just at the city level, but across the state. And we have a chance this election to elect progressives across the state, not only to defeat radical conservative Republicans who support neo-Nazis and white supremacists like Bob Sutherland here in the 39th, but also to take out corporate Democrats who for the last 20 years have done nothing. Martin Luther King Jr. says, cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Expediency asks the question, is it politic? Vanity asks the question, is it popular? But conscience asks the question, is it right? And there comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but one must take it because it is right. I know that by just introducing this ordinance, whether it passes or not, could risk me my seat in 2023. And you know what? I don't care. I'm gonna see the police union backing a challenger in 2023, but I don't care, because I am doing what I believe is right for our city and for our community. I wanna thank you guys for inviting me here today to speak to you and the rest of the Progressive Caucus. So thank you.
And up next, we have Tiffany.
Hi, thanks, Keoki. So I'm Tiffany Kelly. I am the membership and outreach person here with Progressive Caucus. Mainly, I was asked to remind everyone that you can join the Progressive Caucus for a prorated amount of $15. But quite honestly, in the current state of things right now, I would encourage you to donate money to Black Lives Matter, donate money to an organization that is going to support our people of color in all of these trying times. I live in Snohomish. Snohomish is now on the map. Our county and my city that I've lived in for a decade has basically been taken over by armed vigilantes many nights running, encouraged by the mayor of Snohomish and the sheriff of Snohomish County. There were armed vigilantes on our streets drinking based on the rumor that Antifa was coming to loot and riot and take over the town. It's infuriating and it's frustrating, and I went to a counter protest the day after those people were on our streets. It was full of love and teenagers and people of color and everyone coming together to show that that is not our town. These people were from elsewhere. They were not from here. But the hate that I saw as I was standing on the street corner watching a truck do a U-turn in the middle of the street and go after teenagers on the curb, I was honestly surprised to see that much hatred in my town. I know it's there, but to see it that blatantly displayed was horrifying. So yesterday on the sheriff's Facebook page, he basically defund the police as a dog whistle to rile up his base. He got them all to join the county council meeting where there was discussion of an across the board cut because we're just not getting the sales tax money, right? So instead of approaching it from the point of view that everyone needs to, tighten their belts, he riled everyone up, and it was 6 hours of public comment. People crying foul that, we are trying to defund the police, and that is absolutely not the case. I spent a lot of time yesterday fighting that narrative. So fortunately, we already have a recall campaign in the works. It has been approved by a judge. I think there's something going on where it's been slightly delayed, but hopefully we'll be out signature gathering soon. I will be on the streets as much as I can, trying to recall our sheriff who supports Proud Boys, armed vigilantes, and white supremacists, and then he turns around and gets them riled up to try and give them special consideration. So that's kind of what's going on in this town, and it's really, really hard. And I'm so glad to have the support of progressives and people who are willing to fight for what is right and to stand with our people of color in this town and show them that we are here for them and be good allies. So thank everyone out there for being allies, and just keep doing what you're doing. And if you want to join our org, $15 prorated for the rest of the year. Thanks.
Thank you, Tiffany. I just want to add, what you just said reminded me of something Dr. Cornell West said recently on, I think it's Anderson Cooper. I don't know. I don't watch mainstream news, but the point is, he said, we got a love that the world can't take away. And I think that's what you're talking about. I think you're talking about your hometown, even with these carpetbaggers of hate coming into it, they couldn't take that away. And the thing is, they have to carpetbag because there's so much love around, and that love's going to defeat them. At least that's what the Aloha spirit tells me. So Justin, did you say you were going to jump on?
Well, okay. How about I jump on?
So I think we are having we're improving.
We're
right?
improving. So we've got a couple of awesome ones. So Keoki, I'm going to let you introduce them. This is April Berg, one of our endorsed candidates, and Carolina Mejia, also one of our endorsed candidates. So I'm going to let you take that. I'll be your sidekick while you're Johnny Carson.
All right. Well, I'm a terrible Johnny Carson, but we'll see what we can do. So originally, can you tell us real quick what the game we were going to play was, and then we're going to improv that game in a different way.
Yes. So originally, because we had a whole bunch, and all of a sudden candidates were finding that they not only had protests, special meetings at their city council. So I'm really happy people are out there doing the work, but people were being pulled. So originally I had 16 of our 21, and we were going to do sort of a survivor thing where I was going to have people look at their engagement, what they're saying out on Facebook and Twitter and Twitch and Instagram, and try to match it to the candidate. And if they're really engaging with their constituency, people will be able to guess. But now I've got two of our awesome candidates, but they're the only two. So I'm trying to find a fun way that we can do that. And I've got their tweets open. We can still kind of do that, but I'm going to let you just maybe get to know them, ask them a few questions while I take a look at that.
All right, great. Well, let's have, let's see. Can we have both of them on the screen or just one at a time? if it's one at a time, I'd like to call up April Berg.
The host can do either.
Ooh, great. Well, let's bring them both up. And while that's going on, so somebody mentioned that I'm a.
Is that a human life or are those squeaky shoes?
Is that me? I have a family of bunnies in my backyard. It might be now. All right. So, well, I'll set up. I'll set up the venue here. One of the themes that I'm hearing from myself, and also from Senators Hasegawa and from Varisha Khan and everyone else, is this idea that this is the time, this is the moment in history where change can come, and that's a really interesting thing to hear here, because I have a friend who is a member of the Anishinaabe tribe, and she tells me about stories from her family that talk about a time of great change. And I'm not going to even try or attempt to tell the story of another people's. But what I will say is we've had these long discussions sitting next to water, just talking about how in her tradition, they speak of a time which they believe is now, where the whole of humanity can make a choice to go on one path or the other. The other path is the same old path that it has been on, that eventually leads to terrible things. Or we can choose a completely different path. And it's only connecting with me now as I hear this theme coming up, that more and more BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color are standing up, rising together, running for different offices and winning those offices. And it feels like the changes we're crying for, and the things that we see on the streets, and the stories of my Anishinaabe friend are all culminating in this moment in time now. And I'll bring that up because one of our most interesting races is the one that Varisha Khan brought up, which is there is one Latina woman running for commissioner in the entire state. Mm-hmm. And that woman is Carolina Mejia. Mm-hmm. Can we get Carolina on? Oh, I'm back on. I'm the lead guy. Can we get Carolina on screen?
If we go to gallery view, we'll have all three of you.
All right, great. Who does that?
Yeah, the host will go to gallery view. Hey, Carolina, while we're getting that together, I have a question for you and April Berg. Tell us about representation of women of color on county councils throughout our state and any legislative position. What does that look like for our state?
So for county commission, there's currently, if I'm correct, no woman of color currently representing in the whole of Washington state. There's currently 2 Latina women, I'm going to correct Keoki on that, one in Western Washington, one in Eastern Washington, who are running for the county commission seat. So I think it's Ana Peralta is the other Latina woman who is running. But other than us 2, I haven't seen another woman of color.
Well, in April, what does it look like in the legislature right now? Not who's running, but who's in the legislature now that represents people of color?
So I don't know the number right off the top of my head. I know that I believe there's 6 Black women right now in our state legislature, and that's in the House. We don't have any in the Senate, and I'm actually shocked by the lack of county commissioners who are women of color. That is absolutely shocking. So no, there's a void. There's just a complete void, and that means that those are voices that we're not hearing in these important bodies.
Well,
and that's one of them right there.
Yeah, right there. So I'm going to let you both go as just whoever says it first. What's the very first thing that somebody coming up to you in a virtual or a real town hall asks you when they see you running? What's the very first thing you hear most often?
Gosh.
Other than, thank gosh, you're running.
Yeah, well, there's a little bit of that. I think for me, it's phrased different ways, but it's like, do you really have time for all this? It's some kind of question they'll either ask, oh, you've got so many kids, oh, you've got so many response. Do you really?
That's not a compliment.
And it's not, and it's kind of one of
in your place.
Yeah, it's like, ooh. So that's one of the things I get a lot.
Well, 20 years ago, they would have said, what does your husband think of this?
Yeah, I feel like people have been close and then they bite their tongue like, so, but I can say that there's been a lot of support too. So we're making progress.
Well, you're both doing a whole lot of a new type of campaigning, is all of this engagement that we love, meeting people where they are, shaking their hands, and now all of a sudden we're having to engage like this. So you also have your own life. So let's take it away from that for a moment. When is the last time one of you went for a walk that was longer than to the store?
For me, it was not a walk, but we went for a bike ride, which was nice. We hadn't done that in a while with my family. That was last 2. So it's been a lot of time on the campaign. So that was a nice little break to do. I know that I'm scheduled for one pretty soon. Definitely those personal breaks are necessary when you're running a campaign.
What about you, April?
So today we did about 3 miles at a rally and march in Marysville. My husband and one of my daughters, we went out there to support the young Black youth and the Black community in Marysville. And we estimate 3 miles.
Well, thank you. You combined what is really present, and it's
Yeah.
been so important forever, but I'm finally glad we're ripping off the bandage on this and talking about it. And then you can also improve your body at the same time. So
I say 3 miles because that's what I told myself. I didn't count the steps. But that's
your soul gets a workout while your legs do.
Yes.
It could have been more.
It could. I know. It's like, talk to me tomorrow. It's gonna be a solid 5.
So have either one of you found a skill? And I'm looking for the one good thing amongst this pandemic. Have either one of you learned a brand new skill?
Ooh.
Anybody?
I've got 2 for Carolina, actually. One, so, and let me back up. So I was recently interviewing a candidate, and I was asking them about, how are you going to campaign? And they had no idea, none whatsoever, which is terrible. They had another candidate, same question. Things are different. How are you going to run? And he goes, wow, it's terrible, but I'm doing blah, 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 blah. And that's what I liked. I don't like a candidate who, when they come up to an obstacle, they're like, well, I don't know what to do. And then you have another candidate that's like, well, what can we do? And so one of the things that Carolina did was she started Coffee with Carolina, which is every Saturday at 10 a.m., bringing people from our community to discuss with them how they're making our community better. And then also how she, as a county commissioner, could help them do that.
Awesome.
She's developing her Oprah skills.
Well, hey, listen, April, we have a question from our YouTube audience. From the education perspective, what do you think is needed to protect our state's paramount duty in our current health and economic crisis?
I'm assuming they're asking in terms of the financing that goes along with that paramount duty and making sure that we don't go backwards on that. So I think during this educational crisis, a couple of things. One, we've got to maintain the current funding levels, which are constitutionally protected, but there's a lot of pieces that aren't. So one of the things we need to do is make sure all of our kiddos have access and deal with digital equity. This current crisis has shown us that inequities that are living in our kiddos' daily lives, and now they're impacting their education in huge ways. So we must do something about digital equity. And I think in order to protect it, I mean, let's be real, we got to talk about taxes, and we're in the most regressive tax state in the nation. And so in order to protect education, protect healthcare, protect transportation, we've got to talk about more progressive taxes. But I think think in terms of this specific crisis, we're going to need mental health counselors, so many more than we currently have in our schools. We're going to need more digital access. We're going to need more space, quite frankly. So there's a lot that's going to go on in terms of being able to perform our paramount duty in education, but it's going to take money and it's going to take will.
So April, what you're telling me is that while we have a set amount of things that we're required to do, it's really the minimal. In our new world, we have so many other things, and that's when you find that so many kids are left out because they don't have those resources.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said minimal, because our prototypical school funding model is minimal. That is the absolute bare bones minimum, and it's, quite frankly, even before this crisis, it wasn't enough, and we need to start looking at that model, that funding model. So now with the crisis and the highlights that we've seen and the inequities, we've got to do better.
Well, I have a question that works with both state and county. So as a lot of people probably know, counties are actually localized state government. They just devolve into the states. And so that's where it makes it very important to have important fighters like Carolina Mejia running. So how does, and I'll start with Carolina and move it over April, how is the most effective way for a county council member to work with the state ledge, even while they're in the county council, to make sure that they are getting the focuses they need at the local level? Oh, Carolina, we've got you muted. Let's get you fixed up. Go ahead, Carolina.
Okay. So for the county, that's one of the biggest things. Basically, we're our own legislators for the county. We are responsible for advocating for all of our departments to get the funds we need for our county. So it's very important to have this relationship with our legislators, to know them, and especially to know the needs of the county, to be able to present them in a way. We have to care. And that's what I've seen lacking in our county. It's just, they're not showing up. Superior Court just lost millions of funding from the state because the county commission wouldn't show up to the meetings. And so that's, those are resources that in the county we are losing just because we're not advocating for the resources that are needed.
Is it often because the counties don't know how to actually advocate and work with the state ledge?
No, I think it's they just don't show up to the meetings, period, point blank. They are just wanting these short-term solutions. They're wanting the easy way out. And this takes work. This takes showing up. And if they're not showing up to the required meetings, if they're not acting like they care, then we're going to get the crappy end of the stick, basically.
So we're not just talking about people not being engaged in voting or necessarily becoming a PCO or even showing to county council or going to lobby day in Olympia. We're talking about the actual elected officials who weren't showing up.
Yeah, we need elected officials. And also when it comes to representation within our county, we, of course, we have to hold our elected officials accountable in every step of the way. That's the responsibility of the constituents when it comes to that, holding our elected officials accountable. It's very important.
So we're not going to see either one of you taking time off from your duties once elected going golfing, right? I mean, you're going to set a new example for elected officials. You're going to get right to work.
Yes. I'm ready to hit the ground running, and I'm already campaigning and working full time, so I already have a full schedule. I'm used to having a full schedule, and the reason I'm running, it's because we need someone there full time to actually go out and listen to what the people need here in Thurston County.
That's so awesome. So before we go, and then I'll move it over to Keoki. How about 30 seconds from both of you to tell everybody why they'd be a fool not to bring you on?
Oh my word. So I'll jump in. So there's a lot of reasons, but I think right now we need experience, dedication, and truth telling at our legislative level. And to Carolina's point, we need that collaboration, working together with our counties, with our local jurisdictions. But again, going back to that regressive tax code, we need champions in there who are going to fight for progressive values. Our state's budget is a reflection of our values, and you need folks in there who really, really understand that.
That is so awesome. Thank you, April. Carolina.
Yeah, for me, it's like April said, I'm gonna, it's all about bringing unity, bringing transparency and accountability to the county. And I plan to bring that. I've worked with several people in my job that have different opinions, and it's all about bringing different opinions to the table and finding a solution. And it's more important now than ever to have that communication, to have someone who has this experience communicating with people from all kind of life, and bringing a diverse voice to the table it's really important now.
Thank you so much. And I know both of you, I've followed you both, and this is not like the first thing you thought of. You've been involved in your communities for a very long time. I mean, April, how long were you on this? You were a school director, correct?
I'm a current school board director. This is my second school board. I sat on the Redmond school board, and now I'm on the Everett school board. And so this current term started last November.
Awesome. And Caroline, you've got an impressive resume.
Yeah, so well, for me, for the Democratic Party, I've served in the Latino caucus as their treasurer, and I've served in other organizations as well, mostly based on community-based and immigration rights. So that's been my work.
Well, thank you both. We are very, very proud of your campaigns, and we're very happy that our membership decided to endorse you both. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Okay, Keoki, you're up next.
All right, thank you. And speaking of proud, we are proud of the candidates we're endorsing, and we are proud of the candidates we have endorsed in the past. In 2018, Joe Wynn was running for the 34th LD state Senate seat, and I remember because we had to read all these questionnaires, and his was the last in the stack. And Justin goes like, "Hey, Keoki, check out this questionnaire." And it was awesome. So I'm a political nerd, and if you are too, go to the website, Washington State Progressive Caucus, and go read Joe Wynn's questionnaire from 2018. Because when AOC talks about having standards and living up to them and making those standards our demands, I'm pretty sure she was reading Joe's Progressive Caucus questionnaire. And speaking of Joe, one other thing before I introduce him, he has a fantastic karaoke voice. And I'm telling you, I'm going to figure out, we were talking about different ways to campaign and contribute. I'm going to figure out a way to monetize virtual karaoke, so we can get Joe doing that. And we can make money for progressive candidates. We can make money for progressive causes like BLM or anything we want with Joe's beautiful pearly voice. And with that, I would like to introduce everyone to Joe Wynn. We are very, very proud of endorsing you and filling the democratic gap that existed between endorsement, support, and donation. Thank you, Joe.
No, thank you so much for having me. And on the karaoke side, it only sounded good because I was in a group of like 15 people. That probably wasn't me. So, but I do want to piggyback off of something that Carolina and April had mentioned, the need for more representation in our elected bodies. And I want to say a couple of things too that kind of bounces off what they had said about showing up. Showing up is a real thing. And I don't think people realize the systemic inequities that keeps people of color and women out of the legislature or in public office. And what's funny is that for me, I've only been there for less than 2 years at this point. And as a person of color, I'm used to working, twice as hard for half as much. So when you get to the legislature and you're like running, and then not everybody's running with you, but the people of color are, but not everybody else is running with you. And I think it's kind of a mindset that we have, in that because we're so used to scarcity, we feel that we have to always be hustling for every single thing. And that's why we need representation, but that's also why we need to have that mindset that's there. There's only 6.5, 7, Steve Hobbs is half, I don't know how to count him, people of color in the legislature. Of that, there are no African Americans, which is a travesty. So I wish everybody the best of luck, April and everybody else, as you're running for office. So the quick thing that I wanted to chat real quick with the rest of the Progressive Caucus is the fact that we need to make sure we have progressive revenue. And I just want to put it into context, because we talk about this all the time. I think everybody understands that our tax structure is regressive, but I want to put it into context why that is. If you're looking at it right now, our state budget is looking at about a $7 to $8 billion shortfall over the next biennium, so the next 3 or so years, $7 to $8 billion. And the way that our budget works is it's very constrained. 85% you can't actually spend on besides what is there. So you can't really cut those. 50% is constitutional. A lot of it is federal matches as well. So that leaves only about 15% of things that you can cut. And you're talking things like education, like higher education. The reason why tuition fees went up and why a lot of kids couldn't go to school during the last recession was because of this. And if you look at, say, for instance, folks who are the most vulnerable, those who are on TANF, a lot of people were cut off because of the austerity measures that were taken back then as well. And I don't believe that you can have racial justice without economic justice. And we know we have certain communities that have been left out of our, not just political process, but our economic process on purpose, especially our Black community. And because of that, I feel very strongly that we need to have an anti-austerity measure when it comes to how we talk about our next budget, which means we have to have progressive taxation. There was an article that came out just before I hopped on this call, and it talked about how Democrats are not shy about talking about taxes, especially in an election year. So every single House member is up, half the Senate is up. And you're damn right we're not shy about it, because we did it last time and it didn't work. We have to talk about taxes because people's lives are on the line. And when people talk about how, oh, it's hard to have a cut in a recession, it's not a recession for everybody. There is one billionaire, one person in Washington State who's made $24 billion since COVID. $24 billion since COVID. Not worth 24 billion. He's worth like 175, but just 24 billion since COVID. So less than 30% of that wealth can plug our budget for the next 3 years. It would make sure that families are housed. It makes sure that families are stable. It'll make sure that people have unemployment insurance and protections in place. It'll make sure that everybody gets a chance to partake in the economic growth that we'll see after we get this recession. So the reason why it's so important for us to talk about progressive revenue is not the progressive revenue so much as why we need to invest in our communities and our people. And this is not a vacuum. We've done this before. The last time in 2008, what happened was we saw some of the greatest wealth inequality when we had some of the most robust economic growth in Washington State. So last time we made no tax revenue, we did only cuts, and we left all the business exemptions in place. Right after that, when the economy came back up, all the businesses and the 1% folks made as much money as they've ever had in their entire lives. Yet we continue to see underfundings of our school, underfunding of our healthcare, underfunding of our social service programs, and that leads to injustices in our society. So as we talk about progressive revenue, we need to make sure we understand why it's so important. And it's because we have a society that allows for one person to have literally almost on its way to $1 trillion when in their backyard we have rampant homelessness. And by the way, because of affordability issues, right? So it is incumbent upon us in the legislature to make sure that we don't just solve for a budget crisis, we're solving for an economic crisis as well. And that means making sure that everybody gets a chance to be successful in our economy and not just the wealthy few, which is what has been happening in the past. And it's all systemic, right? It goes back to who gets elected. It gets back to who gets to make these decisions. And this is the most diverse legislature in Washington State's history. This is by far the most diverse legislature in Washington State's history. And like I mentioned, we have 6 in the Senate. I think 6 in the Senate. Again, no Black people. And this is the most diverse. We have a long way to go. And a lot of it is rooted in how our society invests our dollars. And it's not done in a way that is just. And just a quick context, I think I'm running out of time pretty soon, but we are talking very big and bold things, everything from, I think Frank Chop called it a pay your fair share, but it's a high earners payroll where effectively if you make over X amount of dollars, his proposal was 500,000, mine was $1 million, you pay a marginal tax associated with that. What's interesting is that if you just had a 1% tax on top of $1 million, so this is on their payroll, so only the $1,001,001, their tax liability is 1 cent. You can raise about $300 million a year in Washington State with that plan, and it impacts less than 2,500 people, because most of those folks who make over $1 million make a lot over $1 million. So we have options that are here. Capital gains is certainly on the table. There are many other things as well, but the idea is less so much about the tax, in fact, as it is about what we're going to invest in as a society and how we're going to prioritize people over profits. So just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity to speak with you all, and I'd be happy to answer any questions as we go along. We're going to need your help in the next few weeks and the coming months as these discussions happen. I'll be honest, there's a lot of Democrats, obviously, who care about making sure that we don't have an austerity budget, but I've been surprised and honestly shocked by the number of Democrats who've been advocating for cuts. And that is absolutely not acceptable within not just our society, but not in our party as well. So we'll need your help.
Senator Wynn, I've got a question for you, because
yeah, man, go ahead.
We're finding that some truths that some of us have tried to say have only become more apparent as tens of thousands of people in this state and millions across the country have found how tenuous it is to have your insurance tied to your employment, and being so incredibly expensive. And I'm starting to see a slight shift, shift in the narrative. But do you see a change in the reception for Whole Washington's Healthcare Trust Act and things like that?
Yeah, I see a change across the board. And what's interesting is I love my caucus for the most part, and there are certainly some folks who are much more moderate on the political spectrum. And seeing some of their responses recently has been very eye-opening in a very positive way. I think when you come from a community, candidly like mine, immigrant community, very, very poor, you see things that not everybody else sees. And once people start becoming aware of the bubble outside of them and understanding the gross inequities that are happening, it has to change their minds, especially because they are compassionate people. So in terms of advocating for healthcare, I think a lot of people realize how dumb it is to have your healthcare tied to your job. In terms of having a basic income, there's no reason why somebody should have almost $1 trillion, getting to $1 trillion, while you have rampant poverty in our society as well. And even when it comes to accountability and reform for law enforcement, I support defunding the SPD, and I support making sure that we have more funding for behavioral health and mental health and social services to keep people out of attack, right? So those used to be things that were audacious. I dropped a bill that basically said, hey, look, because of automation and inequality, I think we should shorten our work weeks and pay people more so they have more opportunities to live their life in a fulfilled way. And I got a lot of hate. Basic income now is one of the conversations about how to solve the COVID crisis, right? So we talk about things that are important to us because we have a lived experience and not everybody has that. And when you are in political power, you got there because you probably had some sort of privilege. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm seeing. But
do you also see an opportunity for us to start getting some support from some of these red districts and some of their rural representatives that are not Democrat, who might finally see how their constituents are affected by this?
Yeah, I mean, well, look, if you talk about not showing up, man, I feel sorry for constituents who maybe not be in the majority party, because I think that's a very real thing sometimes. But yeah, I think we actually have a pretty good shot at flipping a couple of seats. I think Tawana Noble running against Steve Ben is I think doing a great job down there. I think there's a good shot in Central Washington for Maureen Walsh's old seat as well. So we can potentially pick up a couple of seats to make sure that our majority is stronger, so we can do the things that we actually need to do.
Thank you so much for all the work you're doing. We couldn't be more proud of a freshman senator going in there and just getting in deep. So.
Yeah, we're not here to mess around. Not here. We need to, I came in here pretty fired up, and I think I'm more angry now than I was before, just because you get you get told. I used to wash dishes in college. I was a janitor in high school. Nobody told me that I'd be a senator or anything of political power, right? So you have this, imposter syndrome in your head. So you go in, you're like, oh, what if I'm not good enough? And then you look around, you're like, what if they're not good enough and we're just fine? So that's kind of how I feel. That's why we need to have good candidates running for office, because systemic inequity is real, right? Talent is universal, but opportunity is not. And it manifests itself in many ways, including how our political structure works. So I just am very thankful. I saw Senator Hasegawa is on the call, Senator Chase, who blazed the trail for us as well. Without their leadership, I don't think I'd be able to be here. But we need more people like that who are willing to take a risk, who are willing to go against the political establishment, and not in a contrived way, but legitimately. I think people are scared to just talk about certain things. And the number of times I've brought up a topic or a bill, and people are like, "Oh, that's kind of insane, right?" And then behind the scenes are like, that's a really good idea. I've always thought about that, been too scared to say it. So they just need somebody to actually do the work. But one of the things I will call out to anybody running for office or anybody who is newly elected is that it is very easy to talk about your values. It's super easy to talk about your values. It's very, very difficult to implement them in a policy. So you need to switch your mindset after you win into deep, deep understandings of the issue, working through what the problems might be, and being able to pass legislation that helps people, because it's a very different mindset from campaigning to the official side.
Good advice. Good advice. So now you've gone from being the freshman to becoming a mentor to new progressive candidates.
This is weird. I hope that they have other people as well.
Well, remember, you're going to freshman high school, and pretty soon you're the seniors. So there you go.
There you go. There you go. No, I'm very thankful. So, yeah, is there any questions? Or I think we have a fantastic person on the next one, so I'd be happy to introduce her real quick as well.
Well, we're getting a whole lot of thumbs up and thank you. So those aren't really questions. So that's
there
awesome.
You go. Keep pushing. I appreciate it. And it's my honor and my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Vanessa Malapote, who is with the Latino Caucus Chair and the 35th LD Chair as well. So looking forward to hearing from you as well.
Thank you so much, Joe. Thank you so much, Senator Wen.
No worries. It's so weird. Whenever people say senator, I still don't think that they're talking about me, but here we are.
It's like when they're talking about your dad. Hello, Vanessa.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Senator Wen, for introducing me. It's an honor to get to speak after you. I grew up in Washington. I actually grew up in Houston, where there's a large Vietnamese community. Some of my best friends are Vietnamese, and I loved eating the Vietnamese egg rolls, which turned out to be just little tiny egg rolls. So, anyways, enough about my love for egg rolls. So yes, my name is Vanessa Malapote.
Well, it looks like we're having a bit of a connection issue with our good friend Vanessa. So I think what we're going to do is see if she can get reconnected and maybe switch it up. Jessica, why don't we bring on former Senator Marilyn Chase, who represented the 32nd Legislative District, which is in Shoreline and Edmonds and a couple of other places. And I'm going to get her set up, and then we'll go back over to Vanessa in just a moment. And if maybe you can talk with her in a text chat and see what's going on. So Senator Chase, we're going to turn on your video. Well, it looks like you are there somewhere. We see darkness. There you are. There's my favorite progressive fighter.
Yeah, there I am. There I am. This is fascinating. I've been sitting here lurking. It's just fascinating. It's great. It's great. So I appreciate you. How much time do I have now?
You just go.
Oh, great, 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 great. Well, as long as I have been thinking, over the past few weeks, trying to figure out, okay, what's really going on here that we need to know about. I've come up with 4 points, and then I discovered today from Pramila, she's got the same 4 points, but I'm going to say them anyway, because I think they're important for us to think about. We've got this pandemic, the coronavirus. More people have died now than died in World War I. It's that bad, far past the Vietnam War death. We have an economic disaster. And some of your speakers have addressed this, but we've had 200 since the virus started. We've had 243 billion transferred to the 3 wealthiest individuals in our country, 2 of them who live here, and then we have 44 million of the rest of us who are unemployed. So that's 2 big disasters. And then we've got police killing on TV, Black Lives Matter. And quite frankly, I started looking into that. We had 31 Black people killed in Seattle in the last 2 years by the police. And then finally, we've got Trump in the White House still. So we've got kind of major disasters going on here. And it occurred to me that this is a major kind of implementation of what Naomi Klein called the shock doctrine. You know, that most of this was designed by Milton Friedman from the University of Chicago economics department. And what we're looking at is the implementation of the shock doctrine. And we are all of us so shocked that it's hard to try to fight what Trump is doing. I mean, it's you know, I must say that I was very glad to hear Governor Inslee tell Trump to go jump today. I thought that was really very, very good, very effective. You know, and so you look at this and you say, okay, so I was thinking about it. And this morning I woke up and there was a tweet from Bernie who made me feel better. And he pointed out all of this. And he said that his point was that we are witnessing the greatest transfer of wealth in the modern history of this country. And so what happens is that to try to understand that, you know, you can understand it if you put the shock doctrine on it. You can see, and they're not fixing it. We know how to fix most of this stuff. We really do. And they're not doing it. If they're able to take this huge transfer of working families' wealth, $243 billion is a lot of money. You know, so I was thinking, okay, how do we strip people of their assets? You know, we do it by zoning laws. We have the Growth Management Act. We have franchise fees. We have tax exemptions for the wealthy. And then we have tax increases for the rest of us. And so I think we need to take a really, really hard look at this. You know, after spending so many years, I was about 16 years in the legislature. I do not have any rosy view about what's going on. I actually will tell you that I believe we have a colossal failure of the private housing market right now. And I'll go into that in just a second. You know, but how does that happen? We get tax increases. Homeowners get 5 years in order to pay their taxes. If they don't pay their taxes, they get a mortgage foreclosure. And so then the state owns their property. So there's legislation that is passed to gift that property to developers. And you know, we have a constitution that says, you know, you can't do that, but that's what's happening. And they're giving it to the developers for free. And it's quite breathtaking. And these are public policy decisions, you know, and they ruin entire neighborhoods and homes. And the result is we get more people living in tents. We have more in this state. We have more unsheltered people than anywhere in the country. We have 44,000 school children who are homeless. And you look at that and you just say, what the heck is going on? And Washington State, now this is one that I was really shocked about. Since 2000, we have lost in this state 90,554 affordable units. But the other problem with that is we have lost 85% of that. 76,800 of those homes disappeared between 2012 and 2017. These houses, these were either lost to renting, increased rent, people lost their homes, or demolition. But it also demonstrates that we have thousands of people who are living on the edge, you know, and always on the verge of losing their home through an increase in rent or eviction. You know, I call it the McMansions to tents. And I was thinking this last week, the newspapers are railing about the demonstrators down there and, you know, walking up and down the street, you know, with the fear that they might destroy neighborhoods. But these policies, these public policies that we have been practicing are actually destroying neighborhoods. And we need to call it for what it is, you know. And we can come back to that if you have more questions on this. I'm really in the housing. We have a colossal failure of the healthcare system. 44 million of our people in this country who are unemployed, and about 34 million of them had employer provided healthcare. They're without healthcare. So you look at that and you say, what's happening here? Well, the healthcare insurance companies are having ever increasing amounts of surplus and reserves. But you ever wonder where all your co-pays go? You don't know where it is. Then we have the problem with the police killings, violence against Black people across our country, the use of force, police accountability, racial profiling. I believe it is the responsibility of the progressive forces to daylight this stuff, because not many people really realize that in the city of Seattle, that the police killed 31 people, 31 people. And so you wonder why the Black Lives Matter people are up there. I've not heard them use this statistics. I think it needs to come forth. But what we're seeing is our political leadership is failing us. I believe it's their criminal incompetence, their malignant lies, their disastrous leadership, and despicable misinformation campaigns have condemned tens of thousands of people to an early grave, have thrown millions of people out of work, leaving them without health insurance, struggling to pay bills and to feed their families. But the good thing is, I think, is that from the beginning of these crises, the progressive forces are beginning across this country are beginning to come forward. It's not just Bernie. I love Bernie. Bernie's holding us together with glue. But when he said, if you're with us, you're willing to fight for somebody's rights that you don't know, someone you don't know. And that's what I think is going on right now. And I think that people have come together to advocate for public health, to defend workers' rights, to stop what I call corporate looting. It's looting, and to hold Trump and his accomplices accountable. And we work together to protect the American people from both the pandemic and in terms of our health, our family's economic well-being. We are confronting an out-of-control warrior class. If you talk to any of your Black American friends, they will tell you how scary it is. And I do believe our democracy is at stake. And I think, how can we rekindle that sense of responsibility for our democracy and fight this shock doctrine that they're doing? Because they're going to continue to do this as long as they possibly can. Trump and his ilk and the Wall Street Party. We have a social contract between all of us. And the terms of that contract, it's just between us, but the terms are in our constitutions. And we need to defend our Constitution and the responsibilities of our Constitution. Education, safety net, don't give private dollars or public dollars, public taxes, to private individuals. It's all in there, Article 7, Article 8. I think we need to become experts in the Constitution as the terms of the contract that we have established with each other.
Now, former Senator Wynn, there was some conversation in the YouTube channel, and somebody said, oh, I love her. And somebody else says, oh, I've heard about her, but where is she at? Who does she represent? And somebody mentioned that you were formerly in the Senate, and somebody else came back with a very positive spin. Senator Chase, it's about time that you ran for the Senate from Washington State and go to Congress. Go to the Senate. Oh, yes.
Oh,
Can I hear a hell yeah? And I'm seeing a lot of people in the YouTube chat going, yeah.
No, I don't think I could do that. I actually see my role as talking to people to try to demystify what's going on down there in Olympia. Let me give you one example. Some of those of my former colleagues, it's really hard to get rid of them. They represent the Wall Street Party. Mullet, as an example, out of North Bend, he used to work for Bank of America. He's sitting in his campaign kitty with over $600,000. Nobody's going to ever be able to take him out. He represents the interests of a Bank of America down there. If you start looking at the PDC, you say, oh my God, this is how they're holding it. And they are really and truly controlling the flow of legislation. You know, what they want goes through, what they don't want doesn't go through. And there's a group of them down there in the Senate, you know, and we need to daylight that kind of stuff. You know? And there's a reason why we don't have an income tax. It's the reason why we are the most regressive, we have the most aggressive tax structure in the entire United States right here. It's because they are intractable. But the only way I believe that we're ever going to get any change down there is for the Progressive Caucus to take this on. I believe we can take it on. You know, there are wonderful people out there. Look what we did with that, with having our representatives on that platform committee. Amber King, yay. I mean, she just, Amber, you're fabulous. You know, she got in there. It was like Bernie wrote a lot of that. You know, a lot of the platform. They think we're not going to do anything with it, but we can do a lot with that. You know, that's what I really want to do. I don't want to go to Congress. We need to get us a young person to go to Congress who will be there long enough to build up seniority. And I have heard that Maria wants to quit. Patty's been in there a long time. I imagine she's ready to quit. You know, there's a reason that Denny Heck quit. It's just it's so much corruption that you can only just take it just so long. But if we are sitting out here as a Progressive Caucus, a Progressive Party, and we are fearless and unafraid of exposing the corruption, I mean, why should these private people, private businesses get access to our tax revenue? We need it to educate our kids. We need it for social safety net. We need it for other things. And by the way, there's plenty of money to take care of everything. We can go into that another time, but what Bob is doing with the bank, you know, we could save all of the capital, but most of the capital budget could come out of that state bank. You know?
Provide a nice safety net for the whole state.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Awesome. Thank you, Senator Chase. That is great. And that's a great segue to bring Vanessa back in. I think we resolved the technical issues.
Good.
Thank you so much, Senator Chase. And I'd like to bring back Vanessa Malapoti talking about safety and transit.
Hi, everyone. So I'm back, but I am on the road now with my family. Okay, so my name is Vanessa Malapoti, and I am the chair of the Washington State Democratic Latino Caucus, and I'm also the chair of my LD, the 35th, which is a rural LD. We're all of Mason, parts of northern Thurston County, and parts of Kitsap County. I hope that you all can hear me well because we are on the road. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about me. I am a Trump refugee. And you heard that right. My family and I moved to Washington State in 2017, in the summer of 2017, shortly, 6 months after the election of the current so-called president. The reason why we left is we were in Indiana in the Midwest, and we were in a small town where it was 94% white and very rural. We had one coffee shop, and now that I live here in Washington State, I don't know how I survived that. We had made a home for ourselves in Indiana. We had integrated into that community. We definitely stood out because, you know, I'm a Latina woman. I'm multiracial, and my husband is Asian. He's Filipino American, and so we definitely stood out because we didn't look like everyone else, but we always showed up at every event that was happening in the community. We would sit on boards in the community, and we just completely took in, right? And then summer of 2015, Trump announces that he's running for office, and everything changes. We lived in a small community where it wasn't rare to see the Confederate flag flying, but all of a sudden it became a lot more prominent. It was often, it was always, and things just started escalating more and more and more. At the time, I was a home visitor, and so I worked in social services. So my job was to visit families in their homes, and I remember that sometime in April of 2017, I finally felt that I had enough, because even though I had been able to integrate into that community, regardless of how I look and how I sound, and connect with people, being able to humanize myself, right? Because that's what we do, people of color. That's how we do. We try to get everyone to see that, hey, I'm just like you. I no longer felt that that my family and I were safe. I remember that I walked into this woman's house that I was going there to see and do an assessment for her, and not only was there a Confederate flag, but this time they had rifles just everywhere, huge "Don't Threaten Me" flag, and the whole time that I was there, the whole hour and a half that I was there, I just wanted to get the hell out. I wanted to get the hell out, because more and more people kept coming in. And that's when I said, we are really seriously leaving, and we had to uproot our family. And so, I was born in Nicaragua. Those of you that are old enough to know about Nicaragua, you've heard of it. You've heard that, we've had wars, we have this, you've heard maybe of the Iran-Contra, scandal. And so we have had a lot of wars. That's true. In Nicaragua, we have a lot of poets and we have a lot of wars. I don't know if those two are together, or if they go hand in hand. So because of that background, I knew that I wanted to be as far away as possible from the mainland. I wanted to make sure that I could come somewhere that if we needed to leave the US, we could just jump into Canada. This is the way that many people think, and this is what I was thinking. So we came to Washington State, but the other reason why we came to Washington State is because Washington, especially the Washington Democrats, to the rest of the country, especially to Indiana Democrats, Washington Democrats are like the beacon of hope and progressiveness. So I wanted to make sure that I was going to come and bring my family into a place where not only were we going to be geographically very close to another country, or we could just jump and escape, but also I wanted to make sure that I was going to be in a very progressive place. So we came to Washington, and since I had, I have been a Democrat since I've been able to vote, and I have been very active I was actually an officer of the Latino caucus in Indiana, and I was just very active in the Democratic Party. So then I came here, and I thought, man, Washington State Democrats is going to be fantastic, and I bet that there's going to be so many different people of color in different places and such. And it turns out that there's a huge lack of representation of people of color, well, minorities in the Democratic Party here in Washington State. And that is one of the reasons why so many of us that get involved end up wearing so many different hats. So right now, I am the chair of my caucus, but it's been a year and a half since I got elected. But also, I'm the chair of my LD, which is a very rural LD, and that works out fine for me because I came from a rural area. I know how that works. I know how to walk into a red area, and I feel okay because that's where I spent almost practically 10 years of my life, with my family. So anyhow, yes, many of us wear so many different hats and we're tired. So Carolina Mejia spoke earlier, and she is a candidate that is running in Thurston County. She's running for commissioner, but did you know that she's also the treasurer of the Latino caucus? So while that girl is running her campaign, which is a massive countywide campaign, she's still working. She's still working as the treasurer of the Latino caucus. And so let's talk about bubbles, right? Because and safety, because I came to Washington because this was going to be a safe and progressive place. And so I come from Indiana to Thurston County. That's where I live. My children go to school in Olympia. But, but I work in Mason County. So for me, nothing much has changed from coming from Knox County in Indiana to Mason County. Nothing has changed. I see how in the rural community, Democrats are considered the enemy of the state. There is a big billboard in Kitsap County that actually says that Democrats are the enemy of the state, that the Democrats, etc. And those of you that happen to be in King County, those of you that happen to be in Seattle, you feel that you are safe and that you don't have to worry about that coming to your backyard. But guess what? It's coming. We heard earlier about a member of the Progressive Caucus about how Snohomish County used to not be, used to not have any presence of white nationalists, and now it does. Shortly before arriving to Washington State here in Olympia, there was a huge issue with Evergreen State College, right? And the white nationalists started coming from there, and they never, and they've never left. They haven't left. And so the message that I'm trying to give you right now is that you cannot be completely satisfied and feeling settled and feeling like you are okay, because there are others in your state that are not okay. There are others in Grace Harbor that are not okay, and there are Democrats there, and we can actually take those seats. We can actually start turning those seats purple. When I talk to everyone about my concern that Washington State can turn red, because it is happening, right? It is happening in Thurston County. Thurston County, it's not really a blue county, and it's not really a purple county. We have areas, for instance, in Olympia that Olympia is a very liberal city, but if you go to Lacey, it's not. Last year we had Linda Seaman, who lost her election for city councilwoman, and she lost her election to a MAGA guy, and that was in Lacey. Lacey is less than 15 minutes away from Olympia. So what I'm trying to say,
didn't you and I talk here recently about looking back at past elections and how very, very close the Democrats have come over the last 30 years of not voting as Democrat in
yes,
president and things like that. So we're not a comfortably blue place. We have
no, we're not. And actually, yes, we did talk about this, because this is one of the things that I love to talk about, how people think, and every single person that I talk to about this, they always tell me, don't worry about it. Seattle always carry the state. But let me ask you something. What happens when the urban city, the diverse city, it's no longer diverse because people are being priced out of those neighborhoods and they have to move to other
Absolutely.
areas? What happens then?
Absolutely.
What happens then? So I just want to say that back in 1984, it was a long time ago, but in 1984, Reagan won the state by 55.82%. And in the last election, in 2016, Clinton did win by 54.4%, but it was because Trump was crazy and it scared the hell out of everybody. But guess what? He's got a lot of support. Like I mentioned again, in Thurston County, okay, Olympia, very liberal, but we are surrounded in the county in different little cities, like in Rochester, in Yelm.
Right? There's so many places in this state. There's so many places in this state.
Yes. And so what I want people to know is this. First of all, I have been saying this since 2015, well, since 2016 as well. Many of us are not going to survive this administration. And as you saw with, with COVID, the ones that have been hit the hardest have been communities of color and poor people, right? And actually that brings the point back to racial and to environmental racism, because, because of environmental racism, those people that had, that ended up having asthma, hypertension, etc., they were more susceptible to getting COVID. Okay, so that's so where am I going with this? So that's number one. I forgot my point because I know that I gotta wrap it up, but I have so much to tell you. But what I want to tell you is this: this election is extremely important. Now remember what I had to say. This election is extremely important. You cannot throw away your vote. Communities of color cannot throw away their votes. And believe me, we do not, because we don't have that luxury. We don't, first of all, for many of us, especially first generation immigrants, it takes us years for us to even be able to get the right to vote. And we are not going to just throw away our vote because we're not happy with whoever's in the ballot. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm not resentful or upset that the person that I wanted to be in the ballot isn't in the ballot, because I have heard about that. But that's not the hand that we were dealt. However, right now we have this huge battle, and we must get Trump, and not just Trump. We must make sure that he does not appoint any more judges out there, because those judges are going to be alive.
Because we're so close to women losing their right to choose how to deal with their own body, relationships.
Yes, I have a 16-year-old daughter, and who has never had a boyfriend, and yet my daughter's already saying, "Well, I'm really afraid that if I ever, want to have an abortion, because it is my right, and I applaud her for saying that I'm not going to be able to have that." And she's only 16, and she's concerned, and I am concerned as a parent. I am concerned as a woman. I am concerned. If all of you that are watching want to do something in solidarity and support communities of color, I'm going to tell you this. This is how you can help. Even if you don't like whoever it's in the ballot, vote Democrat. Because with that vote, you are helping me. You are helping my family. You are helping communities of color in Tacoma, in Yakima. You're helping communities of color in Renton. You're helping communities of color all around this state. And if you have any friends that live in other states that are also, thinking, well, forget this, I'm not going to vote for this guy or whoever, please tell your friends that they're voting. Make sure that this guy and anyone.
I think we're starting to lose you, Vanessa. I think I'm starting to lose you, but I think we got the gist of it, which goes back to what Varisha Khan was saying, which was vote. Don't do the census, but vote.
Yeah, absolutely. And Keoki, before everybody takes off, I want to make sure that those of you who are in the listening audience who are delegates to the state convention, make sure that sometime today before 6 o'clock, you got an email, which is your instructions to check in for the state convention. Alternates and delegates both, you must register between now and 6 o'clock tomorrow. If you do not check in with that email by 6 o'clock tomorrow, you won't be seated on Saturday. And alternates, even though you don't know if you're going to go yet, it's imperative that you check in, because then if a delegate doesn't check in by 6 o'clock tomorrow, you'll be contacted by 8 o'clock in order to get that seat, as long as you check in now. So there you go. Vanessa, I'm so sorry. What we have here is a perfect example of how rural areas are not served by the same utilities that serve the entire state. And we're not moving fast enough, but right now you're demonstrating we have awesome fighters, and yet you're held by the throttled internet.
Yeah. Before we go, I'd like to say one more thing, which I think we have time for. All right, great. So something I was thinking about earlier this week was, just looking at the news and seeing what's happening in my backyard. and that is the conquerors determine what is written in law and history. And we are seeing right now, tonight, right outside, what happens when they do that, when it's the conqueror's law and it's the conqueror's history. But my question is always, why do we have history repeating itself over and over again? And I believe that Joe answered it with his own question, which was, look at who gets elected, who gets to make these decisions. There's only 6 of us. And he nailed it, because when BIPOC, when Black, Indigenous, people of color are in positions of political leadership, our marginalized history doesn't replace the conqueror's history, but it becomes part of our history. And when that happens, that's when decolonization starts.
2 minutes.
And I want to, listening to everybody here, I think Council Member Varisha Khan is right. I think Senator Bob Hasegawa is right. I think Senator Joe Wynn is right. I think my friend Noel Parrish and the Anishinaabe people are right. This is the time, right now. We have people screaming for their lives on the street for change. And this is the time and place to do it, because Black and Indigenous and people of color that are running in offices across the country are winning, are winning if we are there to help them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Allyship and support.
Yeah, and Cedar brought this up. People ask me, how can they be the change that we seek? And I tell them, we need to bend the arc of the moral universe towards justice. And that just brings back Joe Wynn again, because his questionnaire, I kept the last part of his questionnaire. I'm going to say it to you real quick. Joe said in 2018, representation matters. I believe our leaders need to have the lived experiences and shared values of the people they're trying to represent. Despite having 2 of the most diverse communities in the 34th, there's never been a person of color ever elected to the House or Senate. There are a lot of policy issues I care about, but the main reason I want to run is so other young people of color know they belong in leadership and their voices are worthy of being heard. And as the Progressive Caucus, we can tell him, Joe, you're not going to use you and your 5 other people. We're going to bring more people up there. We're going to bring Representative Berg up there. We're going to bring Representative Salisbury up there. And not just in the House and in the Senate, but up and down the whole damn ballot. We're going to bring Commissioner Mejia over there.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And it's not just limited to who we've endorsed. We've got a lot of candidates that didn't seek our endorsement, and we're going to do better on that outreach. But I would ask everyone watching tonight to not only, now that we're going to start doing these on YouTube, subscribe to this channel. Please follow us on Twitter at WA Progressives. Periscope is often done, same handle, at WA Progressives. Find us on the internet at waprogressives.org. And then if you go into Facebook, we have a page with our announcements, and we have a localized group for every single congressional district. So you can talk about those issues that are really important in Wahkiakum that Seattle people aren't hearing, and in the Okanagan and the Methow Valley. I totally encourage you to get involved and become part of what we're doing. Now, there are a lot of great candidates, but I'd ask you to start by going to waprogressives.org and look at endorsements and look at our list of incredible 2020 endorsed candidates. And we've had a few of them here tonight, April Berg and Carolina Mejia. We have an awesome candidate in the 5th, Chris Armitage. We have Rebecca Parson running in the 6th. We have a progressive running in the 2nd. We've got a lot of great candidates. We just need to make sure we get the word out. Thank you so much. I'd love to get the board in here just to do a big, like, hell yeah.
All right. Can everybody turn your camera? There we go.
Go on gallery view there.
Are we on gallery?
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. Thank you so much for everyone watching. Thank you so much for all of the people who agreed to speak. The list goes on. Senator Hasegawa, Senator Chase, Senator Wynn, Vanessa Malapote, Jordan Sears,
April Berg. Joe Wynn.
We have been very honored by not only the people who came to speak in front of you, but by the people who have tuned in to watch us. So thank you so much. And we're not stopping here. We're just taking a pause to get some water, sleep a night, and come back and fight tomorrow. Thank you all.
Make your mark in history, people. Our history. Our history matters.
Okay.
I have to play this.
Oh, let us turn our thoughts today to Martin Luther King and recognize that there are ties between us, all men and women living on the earth, ties of hope and love, sister and brotherhood. That we are bound together in our desire to see the world become a place where all our children can grow free and strong. We are bound together by the task that stands before us and the road that lies ahead. We are bound, and we are bound. There's a feeling like the clenching of a fist. There's a hunger in the center of the chest. There is a passage through the darkness and the mist. And though the body sleeps, the heart will never rest. Shed a little light, oh Lord, so that we can see, oh yeah, just a little light, oh, just a little light, oh Lord. Want to stand it on up, oh yeah, stand it on up, oh stand on up. Want to walk it on down, shed a little light, oh dollar bill. Don't send me no light, no dollar bill. Don't give me no light from a TV screen. No, no, no. When I open my eyes, I want to drink my fill from the well on the hill. Woo! Do you know what I mean? You shed a little light, oh Lord, so that we can see. Ooh, just a little light, oh, just a little light, oh Lord. Want to stand it on up, oh yeah, stand it on up, oh stand on up. Wanna walk it on down, shed a little light, oh Lord, shed a little light, oh Lord. There's a feeling like the clenching of a fist. There's a hunger in the center of the chest. There's a passage through the darkness and the mist. Though the body sleeps, the heart will never rest. Oh, let us turn our thoughts today to Martin Luther King and recognize that there are ties between us, all men and women living on the earth, ties of hope and love, sister and brotherhood.
Thank you. And we are just so honored to be sharing James Taylor's song, Shed a Little Light, with you here for our pizza party this evening for progressives. It's just a pleasure and an honor. We sing that song every year on Martin Luther King Day here on Orcas Island. And very, very pleased to be sharing it with you tonight.